Hey everyone, John Mike here, and I'm back with another video. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new film Hoppers by Pixar. The film goes as follows. When scientists discovers a new way to transfer human consciousness into a robotic animal, Mabel uses a new technology to uncover mysteries of the animal world that are beyond anything she could have ever imagined. This movie comes out on March 6th. I had the privilege of seeing this at a press screening, and I'll say when Pixar hits, it hits. However, Pixar Hoppers, actually the story and the I feel the message of this movie is some of the strongest that Pixar has ever been in a while. This film surrounding Mabel, who's a 19-year-old girl who has a value of animals and nature and everything, and basically she's mourning the loss of her grandmother. But what happened is that this new mayor is going and trying to build a bridge or a new highway during a particular area where a lot of animals are residing, and basically she's trying to do everything she can to stop this construction work from happening for this new mayor. But Mabel, the way she goes about it is very, very reckless, and I think there's a lot of political messaging that's in this movie, but not in the way you might think, right? Because I will say, as much as there's some pacing issues, and then the second and third act, I think the message is filmed in terms of how we are as human beings and how we respond to each other when we have differences of opinion, right? And people who we think is truly our enemy is not really our enemy. I think what happens is that when a lot of emotions and disagreements arise, as you see when you look around and we're just constantly arguing each other, the reason why could we feel like we're not being heard or not being seen, right? And Mabel is a character that resides in that archetype of a character for feel like she's not being seen, and she's doing everything she can to try to do the right thing, but yet she end up causing more problems than solving them, right? And I will say, with the writing of her character as she transition going into her consciousness into robotic beaver and try to find animals come back into this location so way that they can stop the construction work, right? She end up transferring her consciousness into a robotic beaver and end up communicating with a bunch of animals. Now, I want to shout out the Wild Robot in terms of an animated film that allow nature to be nature, in terms of the reality of animals being killed and the phases of nature and everything like that, and the wildlife. And this film, dives into that, in terms of this whole animal kingdom, if you say, in this town or suburban area, city. It's basically an ecosystem of different animals, and there's a hierarchy of power and everything, and these civilization of people who abide by certain rules and everything. And you see that a lot of this animal life is a lot more complex than it seems, right? I do like how Pixar, going from humanizing intangible things or whatever, like humanizing toys or, humanizing cars in a certain extent, right? And here we have this where they're doing this with animals, but adding technology along with that. But I thought the messaging of this film in terms of how we as people tend to rage when we have differences of opinion, especially in politics, right? And when reality is that when we actually stop fighting each other and look at nature, look at the animals, look at the wildlife, look at life and humanity itself, we realize that we're part of something much larger than ourselves. And which is why that instead of us fighting with each other, we actually need to collide with each other and work. And when we have a disagreement, we can learn from our differences and actually solve some problems that we all constantly are arguing or trying to solve, right? And it's really interesting in terms of how they flip certain character archetypes, where you think a certain character is going to be this type of way, and at the end of the movie realize, oh no, they're actually part of the protagonists and everything, and now they're working together against a new threat, which is only thriving throughout the chaos of their disagreement in the first place, right? And I think, again, as we're in this political climate, it is really a breath of fresh air in terms of how we see art imitating life, but in this sense of you literally being in someone else's shoes, i.e., I guess in terms of having your consciousness inside of an animal, a robotic animal, but literally being in somebody else's shoes and seeing oh wait, we're the world lot is a lot bigger than I actually think it is. And also, even when it's if I'm a human or if I'm an animal, my actions have consequences. And they do that in this film in terms of how situations escalate quickly with certain characters, right? And I would say one of my big flaws with this movie really is the character of Mabel. She To me, I understand in terms of her background and the first, beginning act of this movie, you see her setting up in terms of her emotional anchor of this entire story, which is her grandmother, right? And her loving animals, loving nature, right? But what unfortunately what they do in this movie is they make this character unlikable when she's trying so hard trying to fix something or trying to make something right. She's become irrational. She can't listen at something when situations just need to be calmed down, and where she just can't take a second and process how she's feeling about something, how to properly respond to an issue. And it's not the fact that what she's fighting against is not wrong, it's the way she goes about it, right? But at the same time, you also have the other opposing party, this corporate conglomerate of capitalism and everything, where they're also not seeing the bigger picture of seeing their actions have consequences, and all they see is corporate, greed and money, right? And there's a balance in between when we just listen to each other and actually provide a effective solution. And they do that with these characters in this movie, but allowing to use nature and animals as a way of depicting what humanity should really be, right? Us embracing each other, helping each other, and realizing we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And that's what the base of this movie really is. Now there is pacing issues, as I mentioned, with 2/3 in the third act. Now there is also another problem I think what Pixar is having, and I'm probably going to be doing a video essay on this later on, how Pixar is kind of losing its identity of transformative filmmaking. And what I mean by that, when you go back and look at The Incredibles or Toy Story or all these other films that are iconic, but they're iconic for a reason, right? Up, right? They have a message, but also not only their animation is also just distinctly unique. You also see how they're having transcending storytelling that even to this day, these films are timeless, And with Pixar, in this case, what here in the last several movies, Leo, or even what comes with Turning Red or other films like that, right? Is that you got this great story where it kind of falls a little bit execution, whether by how the film is being distributed, like Turning Red being on Disney Plus and not theatrically, or also the proper medium of in terms of Leo and the animation and the unique concept and ideas that you have for a great a great concept, but the execution falls flat. And then you have Hopper, where great, powerful message, and also using nature as a way to explaining how you're going to convey that message to the audience. Very great way, right? However, what they do fall again is, I think, is the animation. This animation has become a consistent throughout the last several Pixar films, and I'm getting sick of it. I'm just being real. I'm not saying that these movies look horrible. These, again, the way Disney can animate a film way better than I can, right? However, I do feel that just for storytelling, the last great Pixar movie I've seen or animated film from Disney really was Soul. Soul, I thought, was powerful. Animation also, had a way of transcending itself too. And I felt we just haven't topped that bar. Yes, we got Inside Out. Yes, we got other films as well that, again, are fine, but the big franchise films are fine. But these little small ones that are original ideas, not sequels, like Leo and Hoppers and stuff, I feel again, these films can be very powerful if they go that extra step and taking a leap in animation and different stuff. Like I just recently saw a film Goat, which is a great film, and I will be doing a review of that shortly. But Goat is a great film. He used the same animation from the people that did the Spider-Verse films, but I think they did a great job with that. But that's what I'm talking about in terms of taking animation and storytelling to a new level, right? But yet your message and what you're trying to tell the audiences for both young and old, great. We're not arguing that. How I just felt that Definitely was feeling like it was lacking for me in the second, third act, but I still had an enjoyable experience. And I think that this is a film that people need to see today, especially highlighting what's going on in our political climate, but yet at the same time doesn't come across as propaganda or preachy, if that makes sense. Some people might find it corny, but yeah, in this generation, people just find it corny, even just being kind to each other, right? Regardless of differences of opinion. But films like this, it definitely needs to be seen through by the whole family, and you guys will have a good time when you go see Hoppers this weekend on March 6th in a theater near you. I also written an article on Rotten Tomatoes through Nerdspin. Make sure you go check that out online, of my review of Hoppers. And I also got upcoming reviews and interviews coming up very, very soon. And make sure you subscribe button, comment, like, and share. And I'll see you guys next video. Peace.